So this is really more of a collection of thoughts that I'm happy to share with you. Pulling together some of the key research areas I find fascinating, namely AI governance, platform governance, and governance of future challenges. If you've heard, the department which I'm heading here in Innsbruck is called Department for Theory and Future of Law. So we deal with the question, how should the law change, theory, in order to answer some of the key future challenges. So in order to make sure that we are ready in time for the ecological, economic, social, political, cultural, technological transformations of our times. Having said that, I will now share my screen and we'll then start a short input presentation on some of the learnings from AI and platform governance. Can I just have a short feedback whether you're seeing the right screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic, thank you so much. With two screens, that's sometimes a challenge. All right. Now, to err is human, to forgive divine. We're not quite in the forgiving stage yet, but at least we're in the erring stage. Never be afraid of that, by the way, especially if you're writing your PhDs. To err is part of the whole process, right? What's important is to change your, to correct your errors before you submit. And that's what discussions like today's are about. Now, I'm going to talk in the next couple of minutes about how to optimize governance regimes for frontier technologies. How to optimize governance regimes means how to develop good normative approaches towards governing. Governing means, ruling, regulating in the broadest sense, from standards to firm rules. Regarding frontier technologies are technologies where we're not quite sure about challenges, we're not quite sure about advantages, where we're not quite sure about the social impact of these technologies. And I'm going to look a bit at what we did well and what we didn't do quite so well with regard to platforms and with regard to artificial intelligence. And I'm going to apply some of those learnings to one specific frontier technology I know a bit about, namely quantum technology. Don't be afraid, we're not going to talk too much about the technology behind it. We're just going to use it as a case study. It could be applied to basically all advanced frontier technologies. Now, have you wondered how your entries from an online quiz can come to impact elections around the world? Have you wondered why video sharing platforms can lead children to disturbing content? Have you wondered why it is that algorithmic decision-making systems can be or can become unfair with the result of denying you a job or denying you a credit application? Have you wondered about why children might be online for too long and what impacts that might have, and why it is relevant to talk about the impact on body dysmorphia if people in the cohort of 13 to 16 use Instagram for more than an hour a day? Those are all questions which we should have asked and answered quite some time ago. We didn't ask those questions, in the 2000s. So, in the 2010s, all of these elements came to result in failures of platform and AI governance, and some of them I'd like to talk about a bit. But first, let's try to keep one thing separate. We have to keep always separate narratives from reality. So what we think is happening and from what is actually happening, right? So, for example, if you talk to politicians, and you tell them social media is really ruining democracy, they will heartily agree, as will a lot of people in society. But we have to be very careful. We're scientists, We are scientists. We're bound by science. We're bound by empirical evidence. right? We cannot just say social media makes democracy go bad. We can't say that. We need to be sure that whatever we argue, whatever we bind, whatever we build our arguments on is true and can be empirically proven. So let's keep that in mind, okay? The online quiz. I don't know whether you realized what I was talking about, but a short online quiz that just 270,000 users voluntarily submitted to was then leveraged by Cambridge Analytica to harvest substantial amounts of Facebook data. Yes, it's been some time ago, but I think arguably the failure that allowed things like Cambridge Analytica to happen were emblematic of an early phase of platform non-governance, which is more of the bigger problem. Regarding the ease of access, regarding the non use of data protection laws, regarding the availability of so much data in the first place. All of that together coalesced to form a failure of governance. With the impact that a small fine was given to Facebook, but that's really not what this is about. Namely, we had a situation with Cambridge Analytica that substantially eroded public trust in platforms and in platform governance. This was one of the early times where the overall positive approach of the general public towards social media was, I would argue, substantially eroded. And this is a result of a failure, I would argue, I would submit, of platform governance. Failure, as I've said, to enact and to implement privacy laws, failure to enact and implement how platforms handle user data and political advertising, and how and what kind of access they allow to external stakeholders. Similarly here with YouTube, and I'm consciously using examples that are a bit dated because my argument is not that we have done a bad job in the last 1 or 2 years. We've done a bad job in the last 1 or 2 decades. That's the error I'm talking about. That's the problem I'd like to point to, and that's also the thing which we have to focus on in the future. You know, not to let decades go by before we provide good rules. YouTube has for quite some time now, even though it's one of the better moderated platforms, has been criticized from the 2010s onwards to doing a less than stellar job in moderating content, a less than stellar job in reducing the spread of harmful content. YouTube was one of the first companies to have. TikTok is now over taken them, but it has been one of the first companies to have a very good recommender algorithm that optimized for engagement. And that, I think, is my second example of how failures to regulate leads to societally problematic results. Namely, what have platforms been able to optimize their algorithmic recommender engines over the last decades? Again, I'm talking decades here. Well, they have been allowed to optimize them for engagement. What does engagement mean? Well, engagement means how long do you stay on the platform? Why is that a metric that's important? Well, the longer you stay on the platform, the more money the platform can make with your attention, right? We're in an age of attention economy. And again, I'm talking decades. We have not done a good job to reduce the importance of attention as a key metric in order to gain economic leverage, in order to make economic progress, in order to win big. Platforms have learned that they can optimize for engagement because we have never developed a normatively sensible alternative to attention economy. And this is the whole basis of data extractivism as we have it now. And this is the second substantial failure of platform governance in my argument. The 2018 AI scandal with Amazon was based on the problem that Amazon had started to train a hiring algorithm based on a very, very small set of historical hiring data. Obviously, in 2018, as it is partially still now, managers that were hired by Amazon in the past were often men, often from a small subset of universities and colleges. The algorithm was trained on that data. The algorithm reproduced that data. That's in an age where still the reproduction of biases by AI was something people didn't quite know about. At least they, outside of the field of AI, of informatics. Nowadays, if you talk about AI bias, everybody talks about AI bias. Politicians talk about AI bias, but it's not the point that we as scientists should start thinking about a topic once politicians talk about it. But then it's much too late. Once you are getting asked about a topic by politicians, the topic's basically over. You haven't done a good job in sensitizing them to that topic. That's one of the other arguments which I want to make. Also, by the way, as you pursue your PhDs, you are getting an expert in those PhDs. Your topics, you're being, if you do a good job, you are a world-leading expert in that topic, and it is up to you to communicate a normative need, if there is one, to political actors. It's about you. It is upon you to develop knowledge and to develop actionable knowledge for regulatory authorities. Nobody's going to do that for you, right? Okay. Bracket closed. Now, that algorithm, as I've said, was trained on historical data. It downgraded results concerning with words that were associated with the female candidates, and led to one of the first bigger AI bias scandals. The fact that we allowed platforms and companies to use that kind of AI without providing some basic rules, some standards, some ethical guidelines is, I would argue, another failure to govern technology with a view to societal goals and individual rights. Another element I'd just like to mention is the use of AI in surveillance and facial recognition, which has been going on in law enforcement over the last years without any substantial societal discussion. Especially in the UK and the US, in the so-called Five Eyes states, unlike in Germany and in Austria and Italy and France, where there's a rather robust tradition of criticism based on data protection concerns and privacy concerns, we haven't done a good job globally to prohibit these kinds of invasions into privacy and into surveillance overreach. Now, these are the problems. These are the failures. These are the things we could have done better. What have we done? Well, a bit late, but still, we have three normative instruments: the DSA, the DMA, and the AI Act, that all modernize rules regarding specific aspects of technology. And that solve some of the problems which I have pointed to in those examples. So the DSA, for example, modernizes EU rules for platforms. It responds to governance failures. It provides new obligations for platforms to be transparent regarding their algorithms. See the YouTube example. To provide notice on how advertising algorithms are targeted and how user data is harvested and used. See the Facebook example. It provides rules on how content can be moderated. It provides information on the risk, the systemic risks that come with the rules and the algorithmic recommended practices of each platform. Especially the risk assessments are important, I would submit, because they are forward-looking. That's different from the majority. I'm sorry. That's different from the majority of rules that we provide in law. Namely, they're ex post. They are provided after an issue has occurred. The risk assessments are ex ante looking, and they ask platforms to provide an assessment of whether or not their systems amplify systemic risks. They provide for independent audits, and they provide for data access for researchers, even though that isn't, for the moment, going extremely well. The second big approach is the Digital Markets Act. That targets gatekeepers that have significant market power. The goal here is to foster free, fair competition and consumer choice. Again, 2 decades too late. It provides for interoperability, data portability, and equal access. And finally, we have the AI Act, which provides, again, a risk-based governance framework for artificial intelligence. My argument would be it's not 10 years too late, but about 5 years too late. We've seen some of the more serious risks being realized already. We've seen some of the larger data collections that are necessary for the training of GPT-like systems to have already occurred. Specific AI uses are prohibited, but again here, if you look at the surveillance example in the UK, I've alluded to, arguably too late. But then again, it could be and will most likely be a global benchmark for ethical and responsible AI use. Problem statement. Now, I'd like to provide some hypotheses and then apply them with regards to one specific frontier technology. The current normative approaches, DSA, DMA, AI Act, make sense. They're basically okay. You can quibble with the details, but they're basically okay. However, they're a bit too late. They're a bit too late because the last 2 decades have seen the emergence of those companies as essential stakeholders in the platform governance field. They have amassed so much wealth that they now have become basically unregulatable. Over the last decades, they have privatized gains. They have socialized costs. Innovation has been substantially harmed. There are very few truly innovative platforms. There are very few truly innovative AI companies. Why? Well, because platforms have become incredibly rich and they've been able to buy up any creative companies, which is harmful for innovation. So when you argue that regulation is harmful for innovation, which is something which I hear so often, you don't regulate, that's bad for innovation. My bigger argument would be that it is extremely irresponsible not to regulate, because what harms innovation is to allow to allow companies, individual companies, to become so wealthy on the back of user data that they can buy up any competition and include innovation into those systems where it usually doesn't really become innovative anymore, but gets lost, in the overall approach. So we need to do better, and we can do better. How do we do better? Well, let's look at frontier technologies. There are 3 major fields: advanced biotech, including gene editing, generative AI, and quantum computing. And I'd like to focus on quantum computing, which means the application or the use of quantum computers that are running not on digital zeros and ones, on binaries, but on quantum states that can lead to substantially quicker, that increase computing power exponentially. This, on the negative side, leads to encryption vulnerabilities. So the majority of factorization-based security approaches can be easily challenged by quantum computers. The resolution will obviously be quantum encryption. There have been a number of projects on that already. The second dimension are development gaps. digital gaps exist, and digital technologies have a tendency to exacerbate those gaps. And we need to make sure that quantum technologies like quantum don't further exacerbate those development gaps. Why would be a good idea to do that now? Well, 2025, I don't know whether you've noticed, is the International Quantum Year. The United Nations General Assembly has declared 2025 to be the International Quantum Year. A number of international organizations, including the World Economic Forum, which technically isn't an international organization, you're right, the OECD, UNESCO, have developed governance approaches, ethical approaches to quantum technology. Research on those issues is emerging, and key principles have been published. Just as one example, the UNESCO's Ethics Committee is developing a report on the ethics of quantum computing, which I'm happy to be a rapporteur for. And what we are going to write about is the environmental impact of quantum computing and how to make sure that it is as small as possible, unlike the last 2 decades of impact of server farms, privacy and security considerations, the dual use dimension. We are going to highlight the importance of ensuring equity and access equality. So all stakeholders globally, independent of whether they're in the global south or global north, should have equal access to quantum computing capacity. We're also going to highlight the importance of respecting intellectual property and respecting knowledge sharing. Both of those can be combined if you approach its normative with a sense of, sensibly, you can easily both protect intellectual property rights and ensure global knowledge sharing across the value chain. Applying now the learnings from the failures of platform and AI governance, I'd like to share some governance suggestions, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts on that. Now, wouldn't it be great from the outset to ensure that any governance regime we develop for quantum governance, for quantum technology, before it becomes used very intensively, is oriented towards realizing the Sustainable Development Goals? And that's nothing that I'm inventing. The United Nations General Assembly, in the resolutions declaring 2025 the International Year of Quantum, has highlighted 3 times the importance of ensuring that quantum technologies are used and developed with a view to realizing and furthering United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Second, in the development and application of digital services and digital markets, we have not so far been good at ensuring international solidarity and intergenerational equity. We focused on the North and we focused on the here and now. We haven't thought about the data of our children. We haven't thought about the access to people from the global South, from the majority world. We need to do better. Sustainable development, inclusive governance means ensuring that with regard to this frontier technology, global quantum computing resources are accessible to all and are developed with a view to intergenerational equity, so with a view to ensuring the rights of this and of the next generation. With regard to digital services, we have not done a good job in embedding values in the standardization processes. We've done a good job in doing that with regard to internet governance, but not with regard to platform governance. So what we need to do is, what I suggest we should do, is to do a better job with regard to standardization of quantum technology and embed values in those processes. This is important because those standardization processes are already happening. In Germany, the DIN network, in Europe, CELEC, in the US, the NIST, are working on standards related to quantum computing. Those processes are exclusive and costly, and researchers from the Global South are barely included. This is not good. This is exactly what usually leads to equitable, intergenerationally fair standards. We need to do better. We need to do a better job in technology assessment. We haven't done any technology assessment regarding the first rule approaches for platforms in the 2000s until the 2010s. We need to make sure that the technology which we use does not come with social costs and societal costs, which we are only barely understanding. And finally, we've done a rather good job in developing a global multi-stakeholder approach to internet governance, to the governance of internet resources. You don't know about that because it's working so well, right? Whenever something works rather well and it's also slightly boring, you don't really hear about it. When have you thought about who rules domain name servers? Who rules the root servers? Why does the domain name system work? Well, it works because there is a good multi-stakeholder-based cooperation, which makes it functional but boring, which is good. We need to do that also for quantum computing, I would submit. We need to develop a global multi-stakeholder forum, like the Internet Governance Forum process, which by now has been running for 20 years. It was installed after the World Summit on the Information Society in Tunis and Geneva in 2003 and 2005 by the UN Secretary General as the first and only global multi-stakeholder-based consultation process. Why not use such a similar process for quantum technology to make a better job out of it than we've done with AI and platform governance? Now, coming to the end, I'm very happy to hear from you, either address is fine. Personally, I'm quite involved in quantum ethics. I'm running the Innsbruck Quantum Ethics Lab. If you're ever interested in doing a bit of research on quantum technology, I'm more than happy to have you join me. We're, by the way, also looking for a PhD student for a project on quantum encryption. If you know somebody, just give me a call. We're currently on developing a project on quantum security, where we're trying to find out how best to distribute quantum keys, so how best to make sure that quantum encryption in the future works also well. If you're interested in quantum technology more broadly, I want to travel to Karlsruhe on 7 April, 8 April, 9 April. There's a rather substantial workshop with about 30 presentations on responsible quantum technology, so quantum technology from a governance perspective, and I can very much recommend that. And then finally, of course, you know, the Hertie School is at the forefront of talking about, writing about, researching quantum issues, quantum governance. In the March comment from 2 weeks ago, on your own homepage, quantum technologies are already mentioned, you know, with a reference to the importance of quantum technologies for Europe's future. And finally, if you want to stay in Berlin, in May, I'm holding a talk on quantum futures at Republika, just down the road. You are invited for that as well. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to our discussion.